I'm Pamela Kirkland, the host of Morning Edition on Georgia Public Broadcasting. Welcome to the Atlanta Press Club Louder Milk Young debate series from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting. This is the primary debate for Democrats running in the 6th Congressional District. Let's meet the candidates. They are in alphabetical order. Lucy McBath, incumbent candidate currently representing Congressional District 7. Congresswoman McBath declined to participate in the debate and is represented by an empty podium. Jerica Richardson is a Cobb County Commissioner for District 2, which includes Smyrna, Vinings, East Cobb, and Cumberland. Mandisha Thomas represents State House District 65, which includes parts of Fulton, Douglas, and Coweta counties. Now let's meet our panelists. Jonathan O'Brien is an anchor and reporter with WSB Radio, and Doug Richards is a political general assignment reporter for 11 Alive. For complete rules on today's program, please visit the Atlanta Press Club website, atlantapressclub.org. To start the debate, each candidate will be asked one question by a specific panelist. Candidates have 60 seconds to answer their questions. Jonathan O'Brien, you get the first question to Jerica Richardson.
Hi, Commissioner Richardson.
Hello.
I want to discuss an issue that's been, at the forefront of the news all across the country and recently ended up on our doorstep. And of course, that is student protests over the war in Gaza. The House recently approved a military funding package for Israel in the ongoing war there. If you were a member of Congress, would you support sending more military funding and money to Israel?
Thank you for that question, and certainly very complex. And as far as the protests are concerned, I do believe in the right to protest, and I think that we don't want to have a repeat of some of the things that plagued us in the 60s. And we know about the unfortunate aspects of what came from that and how we make sure we're engaging students and including them in the conversation regarding some of these international affairs. As far as the aid packages are concerned, I absolutely believe in honoring the treaties that we have in place that is consistent with our foreign policy. However, I do think that there are some additional opportunities, which I do know President Biden has taken the liberty to do to increase the pressure around how we approach, honestly, our diplomatic relations. There are some serious issues in the Middle East, and it is we're just not seeing that real push to make sure that true humanitarian aspects are being considered for what's happening.
Thank you for your answer. We're at time.
Thank you.
Doug Richards, please ask a question to Mandisha Thomas.
Representative Thomas, Jonathan's question was so good, as I'm going to give you a variation of the same question. U.S. policy since the 90s has been for a two-state solution in the Middle East. Is that realistic in this day and age, given Israel's opposition to it? And if so, how do you either fix that or improve upon it?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I believe in protests. I'm originally from Oakland, California, the land of protesting. We did so many protests, and I don't think that it's out of bounds for this social time. I am in favor of the foreign aid package of $96 billion. And part of my leadership is to actually continue with our constituents and having them come in and voice their concerns about how this actually works. So I actually held a town hall on this foreign aid package on Tuesday to get what the concerns would be. And I just want to share a little bit about that with you. A 77-year-old Democrat said that we had no choice to do this, that Trump would be the first person that Putin would come over and try to get rid of if we didn't pass this Ukraine package. And also a 65-year-old Republican opposes saying that people are... Thank you so much for the answer.
I'm so sorry we're at time.
Thank you.
That concludes the first round. The candidates will now ask each other a question. The candidate who asked the question will also have 30 seconds for a rebuttal. You may pose your question to Congresswoman McBath, represented by the empty podium, if you like. Mandisha, you get the first question.
Thank you. I'd like to pose this question to the Honorable Lucy McBath. It's quite awkward speaking to a podium. And in our last debate 2 weeks ago, I was not able to ask this same question because it also was a blank podium. I looked at the maps when they first came out in December when they were finalized. I mulled over the maps. I analyzed the maps. I prayed over the maps before I decided to run. And I just want to know, because I have six cities.
That is time on your question. Do you have a rebuttal, or would you like to ask the question again?
Sure. Because 6 of the 16 cities that are in this congressional district were in my House district, I have my pulse on the people. I have worked with them. I know concerns. I know what this district looks like. And I want to know, how do you feel about not having the pulse of the people if you've jumped from one district, not once, not twice, again, here in the new Congressional District 6?
Okay. Do you have a rebuttal to your question?
Again, it's kind of hard speaking to a podium, but do you find that you do have vast knowledge of this district and what the people want and what the people are going through in Congressional District 6 with the safe water drinking issues, with the environmental issues, with the global human trafficking issues, with the squatter issues, with the fraudulent transaction deed issues that are plaguing Congressional District 6?
Okay, that is time. Jerica, it's your turn to ask a question.
Thank you. I too would like to pose a question to the Honorable Congresswoman McBath. Knowing that we are in a time where constituents are truly looking for that direct communication with their representative, and knowing that this is a district that is very new for the Congresswoman, what vision are you looking to bring to the 6th District?
Would you like 30 seconds for a rebuttal?
Yes, ma'am. Here's the thing. I have a significant amount of respect for the Congresswoman and appreciate all that she has done to serve us in the House. But I really do believe that if we're going to look at this new majority Black district, the newest one in the state of Georgia, we've got to be able to be there for people, to be there to listen to what those needs are, because the communities that comprise this district are incredibly diverse with all kinds of needs. And
that is time on your rebuttal. Thank you. That concludes our second round. We'll now go back to the panel to ask questions to the candidate of his choice until we run out of time. As a point of moderator privilege, I may also ask questions of the candidates. I will determine when a rebuttal is appropriate. Jonathan O'Brien, you get the first question in this round.
Well, I want to kind of piggyback off of some things that both of you said there. And if it would be appropriate, I'd like to ask this question to both candidates.
Absolutely.
What kinds of things, you talk a lot about, and we see it all the time, members of Congress, they go to Washington, they get into a bubble. How are you going to stay connected to your constituents? Commissioner Richardson, we'll start with you.
Absolutely. It's one of the ways that I believe you have to lead, is creating those opportunities for constituents to stay in contact. Establishing a cabinet is something that I've done as a commissioner, keeping an open calendar, making sure that I'm present for all kinds of things, having town halls, quarterly reports, dashboards with live updates, legislative updates. These are all things I currently do in my role and seek to continue to do as an elected representative. It has allowed me, because as you can see, my experiences, they're my own experiences. And if I'm going to represent a district, I need to make sure that everyone else's experiences are a part of that conversation.
Representative Thomas.
Thank you for that question. I'm currently a state legislator, and there are over 20 state legislators in Congressional District 6. I'm going to utilize those state legislators to come to the table with proposals. So when monies are being funded down through the federal government, we're not just bringing a budget saying these are the monies to the state of Georgia. I want to keep in constant contact with my fellow legislators so that they can create the proposals that we need for the individual communities in Congressional District 6. I'll also be sending out fast alerts. So things that are coming down the pipeline, you'll be able to get that as quick and fast and in real time as possible. I'm going to make it a point to show up in the communities all over that I've already been serving and get to know even more of the communities in Cobb and in Fayette. But as you know, I've already been serving South Fulton and Douglas.
Doug Richards, it's your turn to ask a question.
Thank you. I'd like to ask this to both candidates, please. And we'll start with you, Commissioner Richardson. There are lines of people in Congress leaving. And the reason they are leaving is because Congress functions so poorly. And I would imagine that on the campaign trail, you have had people ask you, possibly politely questioning your sanity, as to why you would want to get into something that so many people are trying to get out of. Why are you doing that?
You know, for such a time as this, thank you for that question. It's, you know, most people, when they think about Congress, they think about the yes or no button, pressing the button, which is a significant portion to that role. But the biggest role that a congressional representative serves is to advocate on behalf of the residents that they represent. And that means advocating for funding. One of the core parts of my platform is connecting communities to power. And so a lot of that is about making sure that I am building those coalitions, continuing to build those partnerships and coalitions to invest strategically into our communities for true vision and strategic implementation. This is not just about fighting the partisan battles. Thank you.
Representative Thomas.
Well, as a state legislator, I know that we have two functions, and that's to pass a balanced budget and to create legislation. Democrats that are not in control also have a third point where we need to stop bad legislation. So that doesn't change on the federal level. I will continue to do that. Now, in part to your question, and I've said this on the campaign trail, and this may seem minuscule, but this is from my heart. I'm already doing this. I'm already doing the state work. It's now that I'll be able to do the federal work with more dollars and more resources. And resources is key for me in my administration. The minuscule part that some may think is minuscule is that I actually get a team. A certified team. I actually get analysts. I actually get people that can track bills. And these are intelligent people who have the background and knowledge to
Thank you, Representative Thomas. Jonathan, it's your turn to ask a question.
Right, this is another question for both candidates. Congress just recently passed a bill that could ultimately lead to TikTok being banned. If you were in Congress at the time, would you have supported that legislation? And do you view this social media app as a national security threat, Commissioner Richardson?
Thank you for that question. So my background, I do a lot in cybersecurity, and certainly it has been shared with me several years ago about the issues related to TikTok. But these are issues that are concurrent with multiple media platforms and certain individual privacy rights. I do think that from a government standpoint and national security standpoint, there are absolutely some restrictions that can be placed, but there are probably going to be some issues with what was passed from a general commerce perspective. So I think that those challenges will come up, but I am aware that there were some additional briefings given to representatives related to the national security concerns, and so I believe being privy to that information, sharing whatever I could with the extent to my constituents, that would have been a part of that decision, so that there wouldn't be any surprises on what my final vote was. But as it stands today, again, there are issues with multiple media platforms. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Representative Thomas?
I think the same. There are issues with multiple media platforms. I think within this bill, Congress has discussed that, it may have been Senator Mike Lee, correct me if I'm wrong, but they want TikTok to expand the platform over 9 additional apps. And I have not used TikTok that much until it came to this race, but I look up to my colleagues, and if they foresee that there is an issue, then there probably is something there. But as far as the entire bill, if I were in Washington, I would have voted on the bill as a yes.
Doug Richards, your turn to ask a question.
This question is for both of you as well. I'll start with you, Ms. Representative Thomas. Many voters, when they're talking about what is bothering them the most in both parties, frequently inflation is at the top of the list. Recognizing that members of Congress have sort of limited input into fixing that issue, what do you tell people that you would aim to do to make a difference on that issue, if anything?
Well, one of the things that we can aim to do is to allocate our monies better. Like I said before, there are lots of monies funneling down through the federal government. This infrastructure bill had so much money just in water that we'll never see before. And with our water issues, the toxins and delving into the Safe Water Drinking Act, we really need to look at that. But I think it's more coaching from the federal government, our federal partners working with our state partners, and how we can allocate our state funding better that's coming down from the federal government. And that goes back to, again, working with our state legislature, working with our state senators and our state representatives, having them to understand what this state budget is, what this money is coming down, and how to best serve it in our communities, whether that be additional committee studies that we need to do. But I think that the federal partners need to work more vastly with our state partners.
Commissioner Richardson.
And I would say I concur with much of that. From an inflation standpoint, in tackling it, we know that it's fueling the housing crisis, especially interest rates and the crunch that's happening. But personally, seeking market-driven solutions, bringing partners together, industry partners together. One thing that you'll hear kind of as a theme is when the federal, the state, and the local are not on the same page, it's the people that suffer. And so making sure that those partnerships and coalitions are really, really defined and really intentional about how to make sure that the money flows to where it's supposed to go, and that there aren't laws that prematurely set aside something that wasn't, it was a consequence of not thinking through the policy. Those are issues, and so you want to make sure that that language all is consistent from each level of government. I think that was, and to modify requirements for some of our social programs. They don't keep up with inflation, and that is affecting
And that
families.
is time, Commissioner.
Thank you.
And I would like to ask a question. You both posed questions to the empty podium during the second round. The absence of Congresswoman McBath from the debate underscores a growing trend of politicians declining to engage in forums like this. What impact do you think that this has on the democratic process? We'll start with Representative Thomas, please.
Thank you. I just heard about this from a constituent not too long ago. I don't know if it was the AJC that published an article saying that a vast number of incumbents were just not showing up to the debates. I hadn't read it myself. I think that that's a sign of immaturity in leadership. You have to show up for the people that you're going to represent. If you're not going to show up to the debate so that people can hear your leadership style, and how you would represent them in Congress or any other branch of government, how do you feel that you can serve them? You can't serve the people that don't know you, and you can't serve the people that you don't know.
And to you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Absence has an incredible impact. I believe that one of the biggest challenges facing our nation is the spread of misinformation, is uncertainty about where truth exists. And the only way to overcome that is through real connection, real conversation. It goes well beyond, it's a debate, but there are other opportunities as well that engagement is absolutely required. And when it's missing, conspiracies fester, uncertainty festers, people become fearful of one another. It's important that we have leadership that is present, that is willing to speak, that is willing to share, willing to be vulnerable, because there are things that are complicated, and there are things that affect people every single day. And if we're not willing to come and face that in every forum possible, then misinformation will take over.
And we'll go back to our panel. Jonathan, you have the next question.
Well, I'd like to piggyback off of that. You know, you talk about the rise in misinformation. A concern tied with that is the rise in AI. And Representative Thomas, I'd like to start with you. Talk to me about how concerned you are about the threats from that AI poses and what things you might do to address that if you're elected to Congress.
Thank you for that question. I actually, on the state level, introduced a AI healthcare bill. I do think that individual states need to look at AI, but I really think there needs to be an overall arching AI Privacy Act, and furthermore on the federal level. I'm seeing in Congressional 6 is the reason why I introduced this AI healthcare bill, that individuals are receiving services, medical services based on an AI outcome that may not necessarily coincide with their situation. So as far as receiving treatment, medical treatment, or just the care plan, the AI should not have the final word. And that's what that bill was about. Yes, this is the technological age, and we must use technology, but we must use it appropriately. And so AI cannot replace a human skilled worker. It can be in conjunction with what we're doing, but it cannot have the last word. And I would love to see.
Thank you. We are at time.
Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you. Yeah, AI. Certainly a rapidly growing industry. I personally do believe in human ingenuity. So I believe that at some point we will adapt appropriately. That's the positive nature inside of me. However, we cannot ignore that there are some serious repercussions to how quickly it's growing. There are economic impacts to it. As you mentioned, healthcare, data bias, period, plays a significant role in a discrepancy in how services are delivered. And so, I had a forum on this particular topic to talk about basically what is the new economy going to look like, and how can we prepare ourselves as communities to both embrace and be prepared for it, because with any technology, there comes good side and a bad side. But again, I believe that we can pull together and solve some of these things, but certainly restrictions are
And
important.
we have time for one final question. Both candidates will have 30 seconds to respond.
All right, my question is about young voters. The Democratic Party relies heavily on young voters to help them compete with Republicans. I hear young voters who are disgusted about the Middle East, who are upset about the Public Safety Training Center project in Atlanta, say that Democrats are part of the two-party problem that's not fixing things. When they complain to you about that, as I assume they do, what do you tell them? Start with you, Representative Thomas.
Thank you. I haven't had that complaint, but the complaint I have had, or the request that I had, was, will you fight for DACA program participants? And so there's a multitude of voting rights or aspects to voting rights. But when it comes to the DACA, my answer is yes. That 2012 program provided the protections for work authorization and for eligible young immigrants.
That's all the time that we have. On to you, Commissioner.
Young voters are not a monolith. Yes, but I would say there is a certain trend of frustration, and I think a lot of that is fueled from the disconnection. Most young people feel so disconnected from their representative leadership, they don't feel heard. And just by beginning that bridge, I've spoken with students across different colleges, just by making that initial connection and saying, hey, come in. I've had over 60 interns come through my office. We've been able to make a difference. And I have the signal.
Thank you. That is all the time we have for questions. The candidates will now have 60 seconds for a closing statement. Mandisha Thomas, you get the first closing statement.
Thank you, and thank you for having us today again. We actually filed our financial report at the end of March, at the beginning of April. The incumbent had $1.3 million in her financial report. I had a little under 14,000, almost 15,000. What I would say about that is that this campaign is centered around eradicating the hurt and pains of Georgians through federal policy. So when I think about $1.3 million, I think that $1.3 million can eradicate homelessness in East Point. I think $1.3 million can pay for over 1,000 seniors on a fixed income whose rent has doubled or tripled in Congressional District 6. I think $1.3 million can eradicate human trafficking on Old National Highway.
Thank you so much for your closing statement. We are at time. Jerica Richardson, please go ahead and give your closing statement.
Thank you, and appreciate having the chance to speak to voters through this debate forum. Just want to make it clear, we have many challenges that are facing our communities today, and none of them are simple. But one thing I do like to bring home is that in every challenge, we are given a choice: fear or love. And choosing love means you intentionally choose to connect and to build solutions together. And that is why I'm running on the Together We Can platform, in order to tackle all of these issues, because I may not be able to do them alone, but I know with all of my colleagues, with all of the residents, we're able to do so much. And you referenced the fundraising. You know, people always ask me, does money determine elections? And the real answer is, the voters do. You determine who your representative is, and never forget that. So
thank you so much. I'm Pamela Kirkland. Thank you for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Louder Milk Young Debate Series, and good night.